This 1964 Valiant took Dale Gardner's parents on their honeymoon more than a half-century ago.
That was just a really amazing feeling I had, to see the car again all restored.
This 1949 Studebaker pickup truck makes Larry Dancero feel like a king.
How do I feel when I drive this vehicle is fantastic. I kind of own the road when I drive it.
Cool cars, good people, great car stories. Dale Gardner's red-hot 1964 Chrysler Valiant took its first road trip when his parents were just starting out.
My dad actually bought this car brand new, right before his wedding. It's been in the family ever since.
We went on a honeymoon with that car. We bought the car in April of 1964. We were married on August 1st, 1964. We packed up and we drove on our honeymoon. We went to Coeur d'Alene in Seattle, Washington. And I remember the fun times we had. We'd be sitting on the beach and enjoying the nice weather and just thinking about our life. When I bought the car, I always thought I would never sell it because it was my first car.
When Don bought a new car for work, his wife Celine took over the Valiant.
Don had his own car, so he let me drive this car, which I was really happy to do, you know. It was a very nice car to drive at that time.
The Valiant's an excellent example of the compact cars that were produced by the Big Three in the early 60s to combat what they saw as a menace to their market share from the foreign compacts like the VW and from domestic compacts like the Rambler and the Studebaker Lark.
I think the favorite thing about this car was the push buttons. I really had never seen that before, and also the hardtop.
It was very distinctive. Because of its hardtop nature, it was missing the center post. And so when you opened the windows, you had this beautiful flow of air.
The most outstanding feature of this particular car is that it is a two-door hardtop, which is a very sporting style.
They added the bucket seats and also the two-tone interior, and it was quite sporty at that time.
All of this in a car that was originally intended as an economy car to fight it out on price and economical performance.
My dad drove it for quite a few years, my uncle drove it, then it was parked.
By the time Dale rediscovered the Valiant, it was ready for the wrecking yard.
It was actually on my uncle's bee farm. It was used to transport honey. As you could imagine, the trunk was full of honey, and that all had to be cleaned out. We had mice in the car, and they ate up the front seats. The back seats are all original, but we reupholstered the front bucket seats. Nice thing I like about this is what the lady did was cut out the old emblem and sewed them right into the new ones.
The dashboard is really cool, but it seems to be a few things missing.
There is. The cigarette lighter is missing, and I could never find one that matches the look. And also the armrest on the driver's door. This armrest was a 11.5 inch, which was very rare. I've been looking for quite a few years now, and I cannot find any replacements.
There's one thing on this Valiant that's not supposed to be perfect.
We can tell there's some sun damage.
I've done my best to polish and wax the car, but my dad was really against me painting it to keep the originality of the paint.
Painting a car that is that old, it would be a sin.
I almost did it without him knowing, but I decided I better not.
There's an old saying that a car is only original once, and that's especially true of the paint. A lot of owners now decide that if it isn't absolutely necessary, they would rather put up with a little fading and some minor scratching in order to still have the original paint that came on the car.
The Valiant started in the early 60s. It always had a slant 6, which is more of an economical type vehicle. In '64, they chose to compete with more of the Mustangs and the muscle cars that were coming out at that time. So in '64.5, they came out with the 273 V8. That was the first year that they came out with that.
Getting the small block engine running again turned out to be a big job.
The engine was actually in quite rough shape. Once we started stripping it down and so forth, we found that the block was cracked. So we had to actually rebuild, get a new block put in, and then rebuild it from there up.
When the going got tough, Dale got some help from his son Baron.
I like most about taking out the engine and taking it apart and putting the new engine in. I learned about the carburetor, the crankshaft, the pistons, the heads and the headers, and other things. Don't really want to start all the time.
After the break, Dale and Baron restore the Valiant for a very special day.
They had no idea. It was quite nice.
Larry Dansereau came into his 1949 Studebaker pickup when a customer couldn't pay his bill.
I started a little garage business repairing cars, and this person owed me a bit of money. So I figured, well, he couldn't really pay me at the time because money was hard to come by. So I told him, I says, I'll take that Studebaker as a joke. I thought maybe he wouldn't do it, but he says, yeah. He said, that's a good deal. It wasn't a piece of junk, like they say, and it was definitely restorable. But it needed a lot of mechanical issues like brakes and wheel cylinders, front ends, to make it roadworthy and make it safe. And it was a good trade because the truck was worth more than the actual money he owed me. So I looked at it and checked it all over, and it was well worth it.
This truck isn't especially hard to restore because it was built to be a tool. The problem, of course, is that tools get used and thrown away, so you might have some trouble finding straight body parts, but the mechanical bits aren't hard to find.
The body I wasn't too concerned with at first, till I got all the mechanical stuff done and made sure that I could drive it. The most complex project on the Studebaker was probably the body part. And I'm not much for adjusting doors and door hinges and doing all that because it's not my trade. But you learn fast when you're restoring a vehicle because it is so complex and so, to adjust all these little things. You shim up fenders and shim up hoods and tailgates and fenders. And so I found that pretty hard to do.
It was used to restoring things when you lived on the farm. And when he restores a vehicle, he gets a very good feeling of having accomplished something special.
The mechanical part was easy for me because that's what I've done for a living. And being from the farm, I used to do this. I used to play around with old vehicles. That's what got me started in the trade and started me restoring old vehicles.
It really makes him feel good.
Hard work is a part of the Dansereau's life, so Larry decided the Studebaker should always show that it's earned a living.
When they repaired the truck, they wanted to take all the bumps out, and in order to do that, they would have to cut the bed out and use inferior metal because of the way it's all bent. It would have to a special tool to do this, and I didn't want them to do that because they would have to cut the fenders off, and as it is one piece, I didn't want to change that. So I figured leave it original, and it shows the wear and tear on the truck anyway, so it was a used truck, and it did some work at one point.
When Larry's truck was brand new, Studebaker was a well-known car maker.
Studebaker was the oldest vehicle manufacturer in the United States. They built the wagons that carried provisions to the Union side in the American Civil War, the Conestoga covered wagons that sent the immigrants to the West were often built by Studebaker. They started building cars in 1902. They started building trucks about the same time. They were a major supplier of trucks during the Second World War. Studebaker had a long and honored name in commercial vehicle development.
Late 1940s Studebaker pickups came in uniform colors, like the ones worn by servicemen returning from the Second World War.
After the war, they wanted to bring out a truck that was really suitable for families. They wanted something special that would be attractive to families more so than just a farm truck. And this is why they went with round fenders and round roof and make it an attractive truck rather than a work vehicle.
This truck is particularly interesting because its styling was well in advance of its competitors. The back fenders don't just cover the rear wheels, they're integrated with the rest of the body, which is much sleeker, and there are no exterior running boards.
They put the running boards on the inside of the vehicle, which they stayed clean, free of mud, and it was easier for families to get in, like a woman with their dresses and small children. And the gauges were very sleek, so that the amp gauge and the fuel gauge, they had oil pressure gauge and the temperature gauge, which was readily visible to the driver at all times. So it was pretty modern vehicle.
This truck was produced as part of the big boom in post-war vehicle sales. Studebaker wanted a piece of the pickup truck market, and with this truck, they actually achieved a higher market share of the light truck market than they enjoyed of the automobile market with their regular cars.
That truck was kind of special to them, and they wanted to sell more so than the other truck companies.
Studebaker pickups reflected America's swagger as a post-war superpower.
Studebaker figured they wanted to show the power of their vehicle, of their truck, when they sold it. The missile hood ornament was kind of special to Studebaker because they wanted to show the strength of their vehicle. You know, people should buy this vehicle because of that reason.
Larry's pickup looks great around town, but its motor was geared for the country.
It's a 169 cubic inch engine with 80 horsepower. It was designed as a farm truck, so farmers could go in the field as well as going into town.
The engine in this truck was the same one that was used in an amphibious vehicle they used by the U.S. Marines called the Weasel, because the Weasel was built by Studebaker.
But if you want to drive it today on today's road, it needs a little more. Today's roads are all 100, 110 kilometers an hour, and this here would be 40-mile-an-hour truck maximum. So I changed the gears in the back to be able to drive it at highway speeds. And what it did, the engine, being an 80 horsepower engine, has a tough time going up the hills. So in overdrive, when it sees a hill, it actually slows right down. It's underpowered, really, but it's still a lot of fun to drive.
This truck's important today because it's a lesson to modern manufacturers. Studebaker was selling well in the late 40s, but they didn't keep up their manufacturing processes or their designs or their technology. And by 1966, they weren't in business anymore.
Up next, Larry and Mandy take the Studebaker for a roll.
He likes getting the attention.